When it comes to preserving tracks on iRacing, the first track that usually comes to mind is North Wilkesboro, on the oval side in the state of North Carolina. But there is one original track which started that trend all the way back in the late 2000s. Oran Park Raceway had been a facility that was open since 1962, and prior to its closing, iRacing scanned this facility before it was torn down and turned into a subdivision. Today, though, thanks to the power of iRacing, some of the top drivers in all of iRacing look to conquer this circuit as we welcome you to today's coverage from the virtual Oran Park Raceway for round 3 of the Global SimSport Jetta Masters Series here on the Global SimRacing Channel. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside the booth tonight is Joe Peak. Behind the scenes, our director Sean Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. What's the best way to drive around this historic racetrack? Let's take a look at your GSRC lap guide to find out.
Welcome to Oran Park Raceway. Though the track has been torn down and no longer exists in the real world, it was once located north of the town of Oran, New South Wales. Thankfully, with iRacing's laser scan, it's saved for sim racing perpetuity, complete with a number of incredibly unique features. The most visibly notable of these is the fact that it was one of the few figure-8 road courses in the world. In fact, 5 of the 6 available layouts feature this crossover bridge, but most of them are decidedly short, with the longest one being a mere 1.6 miles, and the smallest barely over half a mile. You would think that this would relegate the track to simply club racing with smaller, lesser-powered vehicles. But the V8 supercars and open-wheelers with considerable grunt both competed at this place regularly. It must have been like wrangling a bull in a china shop considering the drastic elevation changes and the wickedly technical layout. Turns 1 and 2 make for a fearsome combination in which drivers are forced to brake and turn from incredibly high speeds into a tight left-hander. And the final chicane features a completely blind rise in the middle of it, making car placement almost a guessing game. The last corner also places a concrete wall all around the outside, giving it a street circuit-like feeling. The number of turns packed into such a small space makes passing difficult for just about any level of vehicle. However, mistakes can be easy to make, and most drivers will be ready to pounce should any opportunity present itself. It may have gone the way of the dodo, but rather than entering some sort of racing afterlife, fans and drivers alike can continue to enjoy this beautiful Australian track here in the virtual world.
That was a look at your GSRC lap guide for Oran Park Raceway. Now, Joe, we were talking about this just prior to today's action, a very historic track that hosted some of the predecessors to the Australian Grand Prix. Prior to its sanction from Formula One, hosted the V8 Supercars and a few other events. What do you expect for these drivers today in these cars?
Well, I expect a track of 2 halves. This Grand Prix layout that they're working has essentially a lot of sharper corners, slower corners in the first half, and then suddenly it's a lot of sweepers, a lot of fast turns in the final part of the circuit. With this being momentum cars, that means that it's essentially going to be all about how well you can keep your minimum apex speed, especially in that second half, because there's a lot of time that obviously you could make up around there. The other thing is that passing is going to be extremely difficult. If you look at the map, really the only good place that you've got is down into turn 2. That said, it's got that very fast kink that enters into turn 1, leads you into that braking zone. So drivers are going to be on edge. It's basically going to be a game of chicken, of bravery down into that little kink to see who's willing to stay side by side, or if someone is willing to give way just to save their car. So expect it to be both a little bit single file at times, but also quite challenging as drivers push the limits just to keep the speeds up.
Going to be entertaining to see how these drivers tackle what they've been doing so in qualifying for the past 7 minutes. We'll take a look at those trends in a little bit here. But your points details entering today. Mark Samogi enters tonight with the championship lead with 43 total points and a round victory, his average finish of second. Joshua Gaiman comes into tonight second with Thomas Kinieri in third. Lucas Jocelyn and Gabor Visky round out the top 5 of the point standings. Samagi, of course, the champion for the charity series held during the spring and the summertime by Valhalla Sim Sport. Speaking of today's action, though, Joe, let's take a look at your race details as we get ready for round number 3.
Absolutely. And relatively short season that they run, but they're doing a different variety of tracks in this series, all in the old VW Jetta, one of the early cars that came here onto iRacing. It's a 30-minute race, so it's relatively short. And they have one fast repair. So if they get some damage, which there's a few places where it's easy to smack the wall or run into other cars, they can duck in and try and get that repaired.
Going to be intriguing to see how these drivers handle that today here. Now, as these cars qualify still, track conditions 102 degrees Fahrenheit, 72 degrees Fahrenheit is the air temp, partly cloudy skies at the moment. 4 miles an hour to the south are the winds at the moment, with Thomas Caneri at the top of the board with a 1:15.814. Samagi, Gustavo Cioferi, Alexander Veldman, and Visky rounding out your top 5 at the moment. Currently separated by about a full second, Joe, so far, and should note that several drivers have been spinning out a ton here in practice and qualifying today.
Like I said, when you're trying to keep those speeds up, I'm not surprised. Basically, with these front-wheel drive cars, you got to keep your foot in it, or at least plant it as soon as possible and hope that the understeer won't take you off course. I'm looking at those qualifying times. There is barely a tenth between first to third. So Kenyeri, Samogi, and Sean Ferrani are very, very tight up at the top, even though the rest of the field seems to have fallen away from them.
Yeah, they're having some good consistent laps here. 2 drivers have not set times. Ash Fletcher, who flipped upside down in qualifying. Christian Berg also with some trouble in the same session. Some of these drivers, though, we'll see how they handle 30 minutes straight of racing action. That's based on how you add up the laps, about 20 plus estimated laps distance for today. How important do you feel the track position is going to be at a track like this where there's so many cars struggling with grip, as we talked about, yes, but at the same time where it's such a small layout here, only 1.62 miles?
I mean, it's going to be all important because there's no pit stops that you can try and use strategy to frog somebody. So those early laps will be critical, getting that good start and try to take advantage when others are distracted. And this qualifying could set the tone.
Going to give these drivers about an hour, 2 minutes or so to make sure they finish their current laps. Currently, Mark Samagi up to the pole, though. Had a bit of draft, a 1:15.743. Bumps Kenyuri to second spot, still by 7/100ths of a second. Visky is now nearly a full second behind. Velman's up to 4th. Sanfari rounding out the top 3 as Visky pulls it off to the pit lane.
With Kenyeri's pulling off as well, so he's not happy with his lap, and he's not going to be able to overtake him. Apsey, who's down in 8th, he's going to abandon his lap. And Georgi, who's in 7th, let's see, comes across. Nope, not faster. That's going to be everybody.
So basically 1 minute or so before the drivers will roll off to the starting grid today. So, very competitive qualifying session for today. Drivers separate by about 3 seconds total on the board. Your expectations for when we go green today, Joe?
Like I said, my expectations are that the fighting is going to be very fierce because you know that you can defend easily from the car behind. The car ahead, if they're desperate for positions, is going to have to make aggressive moves or just simply rely on a mistake. Now, like you were saying, we are seeing some spins in a few of those quick corners like turn 10 that drivers, well, or right there and out of 12 from Veldman as he comes off the final turn, got just a little bit of the grass. So drivers will be keeping an eye out, and as soon as they see that weakness, they've got to pounce because they're not going to come often.
Who do you feel this type of track favors the most based on your experiences in this race today?
I'd say that Samogi, the way that he's been racing this season, is one to watch out for, but the way that Kenyeri was up at the top spot for much of the qualifying, he could be a real threat. So keep your eye on him too.
See how things favor out here today as we get ready to go towards your starting grid. It's talked about Mark Samogi at the top of the board, a 1:15.7 in qualifying. That is about a few 100ths quicker than Kenyeri. Sanfari starts in P3 with Veldman in P4. Row 3 features Visky and Vince Jurak. Gabor Georgi starts in 7th with Apsey in 8th. Cortez rounds out the top 9 with Andrew Apsey in 10th. Fletcher and Berg, your other 2 starters today, did not put in times in qualifying. Your quick final thoughts before these engines start roaring, Joe.
With a standing start of getting a good run down into that first corner going to be critical. Expect a little bit of the slipstream to play in as the cars pick up speed, but it's not long enough for that, really.
Engines are fired. Here we go. We're underway from Oran Park Raceway. A bad start for the Kinetic Racing Machine. 4 wide nearly in the middle of the pack already.
Yeah, I think that was Cortez who just got himself a horrible start. Or I think so, as we got a little bit of bumping down to the corner. Again, things get so tight in there. Someone off, and that might be Sean Ferrari.
That's Fletcher along with Ferrari, who was punched off the racetrack. Both of those drivers losing a ton of time. Samagi at the front of the field, able to stay clean for the most part, though. Scrapping, though, for fourth on back. Georgi and Veldman near side by side. Jurek, Cortez, Berg, and a few others also in this grouping.
Just like I said, drivers are going to be aggressive. And now these are front-end cars, so touring car style racing, you can bump a little bit and get away with it. I saw Georgi and Veldman have a little touch there through 4, and I think they're able to continue on. Already, though, it looks like we're getting a bit of a breakaway.
Yeah, already a great launch for the top drivers with all the craziness, especially as we talked about, the 29 in Ferrari did not get a good launch at all. He is now off the track again. Should note the Kinetic Racing Machine in the 29 and is now put into tow. Contact for the battle for fourth, though. Georgi's been spun around in front of the field. Several cars making contact into the grass. Several others go. And they're still crashing as Georgi spun again.
Yep, they just suddenly tried to get going. It was 3 wide. This track has a lot of infield, as you can see, so he's kind of off in no man's land. Oh, this just started with him getting touched a little bit, and then from there, it was kind of a chain reaction.
They do have a faster pair just in case, but still, as mentioned, gonna lose a ton of time. Already a second driver with several minutes lost on the racetrack. He is now 1 minute and 32 seconds behind technically on scoring to the next car with that spin with the trouble towards the start and finish line. And off the track he goes again into the tire barrier. All while P5 is staying nice and calm. We'll see how these cars react, though. Remember, these were some of the cars who just ran into him.
Yeah, and even that little bit of damage could hurt your top speed a little bit. It is front engine, so you can find yourself down a little bit on power if you hit someone too hard. You can see back there behind Jurek, who are looking. Andrew Apsey very much under threat from Christian Berg. This is for 7th place.
Let's take a look here as trying to cross him up a little bit. Berg, remember, one of the 2 drivers who did not put in a qualifying time. Him and Fletcher had big time problems in their qualifying session. In fact, Fletcher flipped over at one point during the session and didn't put in an official lap time. As a result, afterwards, that was around 4 minutes to go on the clock when that incident happened. Fastest lap time's already coming in, a 1:16.5, by the way, for Samagi. That is about 7/10 quicker than the car in second.
Ooh, little bit sketchy under braking. Berg finding out just how tough it is to get it woed up down into 2. But interestingly, defensive lines from Andrew Apsey that we're seeing into some of these corners. And I'm not sure why he's being so defensive, because Berg hasn't really had a good shot yet.
Intriguing so far. Cortez among the drivers that they're going to reach towards Chanot. Cortez currently with a bit of an issue from P5. May allow these drivers to move up in the pylon. We'll have to see here. 3-car break now between these cars, as Andrew Apsey, major botch of the corner, too fast on entry.
It's surprisingly easy to do that through there with the big crest, as he's going to slip up again through 10. And still, this is a good illustration of how tough it is to pass. Despite all these mistakes, Berg still hasn't been able to get through, and this is going to do it as he goes off course through the S's, and he's way too hot into the corner, smacks the outside wall. 2 spots gone in the blink of an eye.
Significant damage now for Andrew Apsey's right side of the car. Cortez with a technical issue now off track. Fletcher has also put his car into the pit lane to use a fast repair for 43 seconds. Kenyuri now with a problem, just had to use a tow, though, from second spot. More issues now as several more cars miss it the corner.
No, that's Kyle Apsey this time. Andrew's brother is now off course, so Andrew gets that spot right back. This is proving to be one of the tougher tracks we've seen them race on.
As mentioned moments ago, something happened to Kenyuri We're in that same section. I think he drove off the racetrack, Joe, and smashed his car into the tire barrier from second position. He's now in the garage area you see here, having to use a tow because he drove hard into the wall through 1 and 2 and slammed that right front right into the fence. You'll see it right here on the second leg of the corner.
Yeah, I've done that so many times in just about every car that I've driven here. If you don't have the braking lined up right, then you just kind of have to you kind of have to do what you can to salvage it, and unfortunately, that's not the way to do so.
Driver that's having the most fun right now, though, is Mark Samagi, a full second quicker than Visky last time by. Currently a 3.6 second gap. He's just ran off and away right from the get-go, it seems, in this race.
Yeah, so Muggy has got himself a nice, handy lead. And without that big of a field, I don't think that lap traffic should hurt him too much. He's his own worst enemy at this point, just has to stay calm and put consistent ones in. You can see he's still pushing, though. He's definitely taken all the way to the curbs and then some.
Let's take a look on board and take a listen to some of these movements.
Front-wheel drive car, so it drives very differently from what most race car drivers are used to. Definitely likes to understeer off the corner, but he handles it well off the final turn. Like I said, it's a game of momentum in these things, so you really got to keep that minimum apex speed up. But it's also a matter of trying to figure out exactly how to attack the corner. You can see how much he's taking the curbs, what you can get away with, because these things like to bounce around. That's a little bit too hot in a turn 2, but that is the way that you salvage it. You can't panic. You got to keep it on the pavement, or else if you slide off, it's so easy to just find your way to the tire barrier.
A little bit of grass there, but still a comfortable gap. Actually gain time despite the mistake on Visky. Of note, Cortez back on the racetrack after his technical issue is in P8. Berg is officially out of the race as your first DNF. Kenyuri is still in the garage area waiting for his long tow. So much of the field already spread out and still an 18 estimated lap to go mark. Let's take a look at Visky specifically, and for him, this is a much needed run for him in the early portions of the championship. His average finish in the first couple races was P7, again entered today with just 16 points to his name.
Worth noting that Visky's fastest lap is a full second slower than Samogi's fastest lap out here. That said, I'm actually kind of impressed that he's kept it down to 4 seconds behind Samogi. I would have thought that Mark would be just trouncing him at this point. So maybe Mark made some mistakes, or maybe Visky's just been incredibly consistent.
Yeah, it's been an interesting race so far. The two teammates looking to reel each other in. Starting to close it back in, though, now that Samagi made a bit of mistakes here and there in the past couple laps. The fastest car on track last time by was Alexander Veldman. Now let's talk about him, and again, we mentioned Valhalla Sim Sport. Part of this organization, one of the big parts of that is Veldman. It's been an interesting day for him so far. Had some ups and downs in practice where he had some incidents where he spun several times in turn 2. Screamed like a banshee in excitement as he started qualifying. Finished the session P4. Now he's in P3 with one of the cleanest cars on track.
Yeah, he's got a ways to go to get up to Visky, though. It's about 5.5 seconds. And it looks like he is coming upon traffic. John Ferrani's back there, and he's going to be a little bit in the way. Hopefully he doesn't fight him too hard, because right now Gustavo doesn't have anybody that he's battling with. He's just trying to finish this race.
Good point there. And when it comes to traffic management here, of course, it's a small track. We talked about some of the passing zones and danger zones with some of the speed. If you reach the back end of traffic, what's the best way to try and handle it at this sort of track? Because it's not as wide as some of the other circuits on iRacing these days.
Best way is to make your moves obvious. We do what we call telegraphing the move, where you basically position your car with the car's body language to make it clear what you're trying to do, which side you're trying to go on. Some drivers prefer to get on the radio instead, but I prefer not to rely on that because not everybody has their radio turned on when they're driving. The other thing to do, if the other driver isn't cooperating, you just got to set them up. You got to think a couple corners ahead and try to position yourself so that you can get the launch and get beside them so that they can't race you, or that, you know, they're basically forced to give up the spot. Again, that's if things are looking dire. But in this case, with this series, I imagine these guys racing with each other so closely, we're not going to see too much in the way of some rude maneuvers from lap traffic.
Especially with half the field a lap down with incidents are running in this race. And a big gap for your front runners. Following a little jerk moments ago, 26 seconds back your race lead. Apsey does have a friend behind him, but not for position, should note. One of the drivers who had issues is right behind him still, keeping some pressure up. That was in that tangent of cars before. That is Cortez, who is one lap down from a technical issue where he was in the same battle for position if it wasn't for the fact that he had said issue.
Yeah, poor Cortez now under the gun, essentially, to get a good result. But he's got speed. You could see, well, there's a good example of the slipstream, how it did pull him up, but it wasn't super effective. As a little bit wide. Apsey, now if I was Apsey, seeing that Cortez is a little bit quicker, I would have let him by, but it looks like he's not interested. He's going to go wide once again. He's going to have to give up the position if he keeps doing that. Cortez, to his credit, is being very polite about this. He knows he's not racing for position, isn't trying to force the issue.
The interesting thing, by the way, when it comes to Cortez's team name, ironically enough, with the speed he's pulling down the straights, is called Really Slow Motion Racing. That car's running in very quick motion. All puns intended there. They also are reaching, by the way, P4. Apsey is actually gaining time on Jurek right now. In fact, he gained about 3/10, nearly a full second rather, last time.
See how much he's got this time through as they come up to the final corner. This is one of the most important turns on the track, and Jurek is a little wide at the apex. I think he managed it well because it looks like Apsey was too. This time by Jurek with a 19.1. Apsey with an 18.1, a full second faster.
And Jurek, I think, has a massive hit to the front end from that collision we've seen a bit before, and that may be the big trigger here. We're seeing with him having that massive dent to the front bumper right there.
That might be the only thing that's helping out Kyle, because he continues to miss a lot of the apexes in some of these slower corners. So it's impressive that the 87 is gaining on him as quickly as he is. And still he's got Cortez waiting back there, knowing that he's not in this fight. So great call from the 76 to just kind of stay out of things. Ooh, was very wide. Jurek misses the apex in turn 5. So this is going to help Apsey even more.
Thing is, Apsey has a little damage for himself right now, and the thing is, the way he's taking the corners, he's actually wheel hopping a ton. Often I believe it was turn 4, he was actually hopping so much there was some air underneath some of the left side tires. That is how much his car's bouncing on that suspension with the damage.
Let's see if he can get the run here off the final turn. Doesn't look like he gained nearly as much last time. Jurek, a 18.9, his fastest lap of the race, so he's getting the hurry up versus the 18.6, 3/10 faster. And Cortez looks very content back there, although he could be distracting Apsey a little bit. Let's see.
Oh, big mistake. Jurek clipped the grass. Here comes Apsey now with a run.
It allows him to close up, but look at that. He's still not even within striking range of Jurek. But he's going to want to be hoping for more moments like that, where he can get a little bit of a bobble out of the 996 and see if he can get the car to run off the corners quicker. Basically, it's a lot easier to pass on the straight than it is in the corner. So you might as well go for the better exit than outbraking someone into the turn.
Apsey that time a little bit more of an arc to try and send it in a little. Apsey he's been early on the brakes. Then Jurek throughout this. Jurek nearly off to the sand trap again. Big lift by Apsey now into the chicane. Off to the final corner once again. Not close enough to send it. Apsey backing up the corner again.
Oh, this is his best chance. Jurek was way too hot into there. And now he's also going to get the slipstream. but he's already up alongside it by the time they cross the line, and I think Jurak is going to give up the ghost.
And I think Apsey was taking the corners much better than Jurek was there. Jurek much hotter in the corners, and that's now cost him P4 as a result.
Oh, he's off course. Hold on to it. Hold on to it. Okay, I was afraid he was going to run into the two of them. Thankfully did not come back onto the track too quickly. So let's take a look at the replay. I think this is going to be a classic example of just putting two wheels into the dirt on the right side of this corner.
Yep, but off into the grass as well. He had been taking all the corners. It seemed way too hot, though, that entire time that Apsey was ready to pounce, though, Joe.
Yeah, you gotta be careful when you get a driver coming up behind you, especially that quickly, to not overdrive it. Drivers who are behind you have a lot more pace are usually there for a reason, and sometimes that can be because they made mistakes of their own. So it's better if you just keep your pace and keep rifling off consistent laps, because either they're going to catch you or they're not. And if they make more mistakes of their own and spin out, then it's better that you don't do what we saw that Jurak did, which was take the car off course and find yourself way farther down.
And we'll see. Flap traffic elects to go, and yes, Cortez knows he can't factor the position battle. It is now getting the space to be let on go. Jurek has actually come down and pit now as well from that front nose damage. He's now using the fast repair. Just 5 cars have not used their fast repair in this race or had to come to the pit lane for any reason so far. Should note that the teammate for Jurek and the George Racing Esport cars, Mark Samagi, lost 2 seconds this lap after overrunning one of the corners into the sand trap. He still owns a 4-second gap over his teammate Visky.
Trying to figure out if he was taking tires. Yeah, okay, he's taking tires.
So he's going to be a lap down regardless here.
I mean, this is a very costly stop. I mean, if he's struggling with the tires, which is easy to do, it's still 97 degrees Fahrenheit out here. So those front wheels doing twice the work, they can go away very, very quickly. But if it was me, I wouldn't sacrifice this much time just to put fresh ones on.
He's even spending more time in there potentially filling in the fuel jugs. I think it was just the maybe habit potentially, Joe, of he may have just forgot to uncheck them or tell his pit crew, oh, hey, I don't want tires and fuel, just get me a new car.
Easy to do if you're not used to a series with pit stops. These Jettas usually aren't in races that come in for stops. So yeah, he maybe forgot to uncheck those boxes in the iRacing sim as we now watch our leader, who's still really hustling this thing. It's impressive how hard he is pushing. This is a kind of a Senna-esque race for him, where it just doesn't matter how far ahead he is, he's still trying to get every last tenth.
I mean, if he makes any mistakes, Visky's right there to pounce, right? And that's where he has at times seen that gap dissipate. The main parts of the track I've noticed, though, Joe, he's made mistakes in turn 3 exit and around turn 7 and 8 here and there. Everywhere else, he's been fairly solid today.
Which is a little bit surprising. Turn 3, I can kind of see. It's so easy to understeer through that one as we ride on board with Visky. But 7 and 8, yeah, I guess that would make sense. Like I said, it has that crest through there. So if you're getting a little bit too eager, you can miss your turn-in point because there's not much in the way of markers actually around that point on the track.
On board with Visky, and you can see trying to work around 80 plus kilometers an hour on the apex, reaching more than 100 plus across the bridges here. Losing a few tenths this lap, should note, though, with some of the corners. Looking like Visky is stronger maybe in some of the high-speed sections, Samagi better in the slow-speed section so far.
And this angle, even though this is a great angle, whoop, as he goes wide, barely keeps it out of the wall. Visky's going to be able to get back on track. But that was on the roof. You're a lot lower sitting down in the cockpit. And so you didn't really get a sense of just how blind some of these corners are. Here's the helmet cam. This is what the driver is seeing. And if we stay on board through some of the crests of this track, you really finally understand why it's so hard to get the car turned in and hit your marks.
By the way, live timing and scoring is available for this race day at gsrc.tv to follow along with your favorite teams and drivers Well, today's action once again, GSRC.TV. Of note, one of the things to keep track of is with the speeds picking up a little bit now all of a sudden despite the major fall off, that's in part because the track temp has cratered down to 92 degrees, in part because it's very cloudy now.
Yeah, 33 Celsius on the surface, and here's where a lot of the blind parts start. It kicks off here with the bridge. Now, it comes right after, yeah, you can see just as he crests it, he has to turn in. This is a lot trickier, though, here through 7 and 8, because it's got multiple crests. There's the first one down into the corner, then another one, you can't see the second apex, and then finally you come off and don't see the exit curve until very, very late. And as soon as you hit that, you're up here into turn 9, which is 10 is one of the places where we've seen so many cars off.
If I was running this track, I probably would have crashed into the tire barrier at least 3 times this lap. That time, he knew he scraped the wall, in fact. Again, that's Gustavo Cianfari, who's the first driver 1 lap down, by the way, from his incident on lap 1. Under 10 minutes on the clock, 7 to go, Joe.
And what's even crazier is, you may have noticed as we rode on board, is even with this being one of the slowest cars on iRacing, this track comes at you fast. It's just non-stop through basically from the bridge all the way until the final corner. You get no chance to relax. There's not many long straights at all. There's hardly straights of any sort, honestly. And so you're just constantly turning, braking, accelerating. You just have no time to get your head together. And if you get out of rhythm with tracks like that, if you're offline for a few corners, not just one.
Now, the interesting thing is, though, Visky, for one, is off track and losing some time. But 2, Cianfari is reeling in a car for position, and Andrew Apsey might be able to reach him by the end of this race, since he is about 2-3 seconds quicker than the 64 who is about to be lapped.
And if I'm seeing correctly, he's about as fast as our leader right now.
That's despite having to use the faster pair early on from a bad start, getting doored in the grass, and then getting hit again.
So this is sort of a race of what could have been for poor Gustavo. Seems to be his history in this Jetta series. He had it last season for the charity series, and as well here this season. Seems like he just cannot catch a break. So as he has those 7.5 seconds up to Apsey, he's only got 7 minutes to do it. What are the times like? Oh, wow. Actually, yeah, he could easily catch him because Andrew's running 122s compared to Gustavo's 117s.
Yeah, the best lap for Apsey, a 120.5. Cianfari, a 116.6 early in this race, to put that in perspective. Just needs to be able to get there. The leader hasn't quite gotten to him to lap him quite yet. Samagi 5 seconds up the road. That's going to be the interesting part, though, is Samagi's also going to have to find a way around Andrew Apsey in a few moments.
Should be able to do it pretty easily, especially if he does this right here, basically squares off the corner. Yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, illustrated, where you set the car up for the exit, and then you don't have to fight them at all. You just breeze on by.
Didn't even get held up on the exit, which is some of the concerns drivers may have. Just was able to time it up perfect on the throttle even. Didn't even lose time, really. Might lose some time there, kicked up some sand up on the right side. Lost some time on the brake.
Down to 3.5 seconds back to Gustavo. This is probably going to be a relatively easy pass for the 29 as long as he doesn't make a silly move here. That's the other thing that you have to remember. It's probably better if you stay a little bit patient. Yes, you know you're much faster, but you don't necessarily want to try and dive it in and make the first move that's available. You want to give yourself a clean and clear move and not have to wind up either side by side or maybe even trip over each other.
Here's the thing, if they trip over each other too, don't forget Visky's still back there. If Visky gets held up, Veldman's been closing in by a few tenths a lap. This is about to happen, though. Bad run for Andrew Apsey off the corner, and around goes Cianfari, able to make the pass and also letting by the second place car.
Nicely done there by Gustavo. So up to 5th, still 1 lap down. Unfortunately for him, Kyle Apsey's 42 seconds ahead and a little bit faster, so highly unlikely we'll see him catch him without something dire for the 87.
Check back in your race leader. About 5 minutes on the clock or so. Estimated 4 to go this time for Samagi. It's been a nice calm drive for him so far. Very consistent, only 2 seconds of fall off. He's been floating around this distance all day for the race lead.
So with that 5-second distance, only just has to cruise home. Again, like I said, really doesn't need to push it like we've seen him doing. Just needs to run decent laps. Seeing if we have anybody else that's close. Jurek and Cortez are actually about 6.7 apart from one another, but not sure that Jurak's got enough pace. He is slightly faster.
That's a little separated. A bit of contact, though, should note. Andrew Apsey just got doored off the track by Alexander Veldman. Veldman was trying to lap Apsey. Apsey was trying to stay on the right side. Veldman made some contact. I believe it was the other way around, should say. You'll see it right here. Veldman gets close on the right side of the track. Andrew Apsey gives a bit of a squeeze and gets a shot.
Not sure that they actually touched. I think it just kind of took evasive maneuvers.
There's at least a scrape right there you see on the right side, though.
Regardless, that kind of comes back to what I was talking about before, about trying to set up passes in the right places, in smart places. There's fast drivers, and then there's fast drivers who are smart. And you got to make sure that you've got the complete package and how you deal with things.
Bisky's still in second spot, holding on behind the 29 machine using the drought. Just has not been able to close up. Could be a nice points position. Kyle Apsey should say, though. +4 for him. This is a run Kyle Apsey, I think, may have needed this season.
Absolutely. +4 for him. His brother Andrew up +4, it looks like. So those two making great gains. Visky up from 5th is one that deserves a little bit of a pat on the back.
Indeed. Bisky looking like he wants to maybe get back by the kinetic racing machine a little bit. But just hasn't been able to try and make a dart if he's even doing so. Has now lost a second, though, this lap. Coming up to an estimated 2 to go.
Yeah, at this point, you kind of just have to accept that what happens, because you're not going to be able to do much to change the outcome other than just run as quick as you can. And I think Gustavo, is he going to let him through? He thought about it. He went a little bit wide. This is the sort of thing you really don't want here. You cannot be tangling with drivers you don't have any sort of battle for position with.
Surprise Visky is trying to scrap this hard here for this spot, which, mind you, again, not for track position on the pylon, more so just who finishes in front of who at the start and finish line. That's the only thing I could think of is the carrot on the stick method, but it isn't quite sound in this method for this purpose.
Yeah, like I said, he really doesn't need to be risking his car. He's only got 6 seconds back to Veldman, so if he has a spin, Veldman could easily get himself into second place. And I think we're going to be 2 to go at the line here.
Expecting 1, maybe 2 laps. We'll have to see. Samagi coming across the stripe with about 1 minute and 30+ seconds on the clock. Lap times are 1 minute and 17 seconds. So looking like we may get 1 more lap before we get the white flag and the checker flag.
Let's take a look at Veldman while we're at it. He's a little bit on his own. Seems like a lot of drivers have found themselves with lapped buddies out there. Georgian, in the case of Veldman, is the one behind, but not nearly as close as we've seen some of them.
Now, most of the drivers have kept their cars clean with minimal mistakes. Veldman currently with the highest estimated incident total with 12. Everyone else has been lower single digits who haven't used the fast repairs. So despite some of the tanglements early on, some of the grass moments, it's been enough, even with that car wanting to bounce off from the sand trap half the time, to be able to hold on to the spot.
See him come over the bridge now, heading into the back half of the lap, going right up to the edge of the circuit as well.
Expecting the white flag this time. Mark Samagi coming through the final corner with about 20 seconds on the clock. final lap expected this time with a 7.5 second gap.
Mark's going to be happy with this one. Basically just took it by the neck and throttled it. He has not been challenged ever since the drop of the green. He hasn't had the biggest of gaps compared to what we've seen sometimes in the past, but this is certainly big enough at 7.5 seconds right now that he's more than comfortable, and he's kind of stamped his dominance over this series.
It's been a dominant day today for him. Just needs to make it through the final sets of corners. This will be a second victory in 3 rounds so far this season to the Global SimSport Jetta Masters. Final section for Mark Samagi.
These cars aren't quite the V8 supercars that used to race here, but one thing I love is no matter what power car, you can tell when the driver is hustling it. And you can see that with every corner here with Mark.
Picture perfect. Another second gained on Visky this lap. Checker flag waves. Mark Samagi wins at Oran Park Raceway in round 3 of the Jetta Masters.
Looks like Gustavo lapped down, but Visky gonna bring home second behind him, and a nice podium for Veldman. I think we got a little bit of a battle between Cortez and Jurak brewing. They're down within 2 seconds.
That's coming towards the checkered, yes. Currently the last car going to be in the lead lap is Apsey. Here's a look towards that as Cortez trying to hold on. Remember, Jurak took those tires, so there's much fresher tires behind. Is there going to be enough time? Doesn't look like it. Cortez, final corner, hard send from Jurak from behind. Not able to close up as Cortez bobbles to the left still, able to cross the stripe.
Very hard send. Just smash the right side. I don't need this car anymore after this, and he'll still get an 8th out of it.
Take a quick break. Post-race coverage coming up in just a moment. You're watching the Global SimRacing Channel live from the virtual Oran Park Raceway in Australia. Welcome back to the Global SimRacing Channel's coverage of the Valhalla SimSport Jetta Masters for the virtual Oran Park Raceway in beautiful Australia. It's one of the first tracks in the history of iRacing to be scanned for historical purposes, and today, Mark Samagi putting up a very dominant, potentially historic, for his remarks, performance today. One of his bigger victories in this series in either sanctioned competition or Valhalla SimSport competition in the Jettas, more than 8 seconds over Visky today. Feldman finishing P3 in 13 seconds behind Kyle Apsey, the last car in the lead lap. Ferrari finished in fifth, able to pass by Apsey with about 3 estimated laps to go. Cortez, Jurek, Kenyeri, and Fletcher were your top 10. Georgi finished 3 laps down at 11th. Christian Berg, your only DNF, officially on the pylon. An interesting race today, to say at the very least, here at Oran Park Raceway. Joe, see how drivers are feeling after this one. I believe you're standing by with Gustavo Cianfari right now from Kinetic Racing.
Indeed. First driver a lap down. Unfortunate. Gustavo, we were watching your pace towards the end of the race, and you were as quick as the leader. If you hadn't had that incident at the start, do you think potentially you could have challenged Mark for a victory?
Oh, I think so, but I made a mistake at the start. Number 13, I think kind of jumped the start and then hit the brake again, and then I lost concentration and I was very slow at the start. Many cars passed me, and then I was touched on the second corner and went off the track, and then I was a little upset and made a mistake and hit the wall. Went to the pits, too, but could have drive to the pits. I think it would be faster, and maybe wasn't a lap down. But it's my mistake on the start at the start, but it was my best result. So mixed emotions.
I can understand. It seemed like you were driving quite good out there. I mean, what's going through your head, and how do you approach it when you come up to drivers that are a lap ahead, but you're faster than them? Because we were talking about that some
Yeah,
during the race.
yeah. In fact, I drive the race watching your broadcast, so I can know what's happening around the track. And Whiskey was in front of me, and I wasn't trying to overtake him. He did one mistake, and then second mistake, he was too slow, and I went through. But if he was very far from Smoggy's, otherwise I would let him pass me again.
That's understandable. Well, nice sportsmanship on that end. Again, commiserations that it wasn't as good as you would have hoped. Anybody you'd like to thank before you go?
Yeah, I'd like to thank my team Kinetic, Jake Fox, who did an update in the pants, and our sponsors, Majors Garage.
Great stuff. That's the number 29 Kinetic Racing driver, Gustavo Cianfrani. I believe, Justin, you've got our winner, though.
Yes, indeed, Mark Sabalki is here. Second victory on the campaign. Dominant race today, Mark. How are you feeling?
Hello guys, I'm feeling very good. So it was for me it was a very wonderful race. I think for you it was a little bit boring, but yeah, for the George Racing team it's a very good week because on the last weekend we had the Rallycross Championship in the real life, and we won the championship. So we are a champion as again, and. My old teammate, Vance Boulder, maybe you remember him. He was participating on the last year with in the rallycross. Now he's with the WTCR in Hungary, and he got pole position for the race too. So it is a very good week for the George Racing team.
Congratulations, first off, on the victory you just referred to there. Absolutely a big one, absolutely to have. But second, it was a big 8.7-second victory in this series today. How would you describe racing at this historic track, which, when you think back to and look at the history of this circuit on iRacing, it was scanned prior to its demolishment in early 2010. How do you feel about this circuit?
I enjoyed this so much. So we have a similar track here in Hungary, the Pannoniering. So that is the track what is very similar for this. Um, Usually you don't use the tracks like going up and down. So yes, it's quite difficult to find the apex on this track. So yeah, it's a very difficult track. So but I loved it. So it's very good, and it's good for my driving. I don't know how to say. So yeah, it's good for my driving.
Indeed, still Plenty of races to go in the title. Approaching halfway, you're in a great spot once again to win the title in this series. How are you feeling heading towards the midway point for the Jetta Masters?
I'm feeling very, very good. So it's a good place. I think I am on the first place now. I don't know how many points do I have and the others, but yeah, I want to win the championship again here, and I hope so. I could do it for my team because they are helping me a lot. So not only here on a computer, in a real life as well. So I want to say thank you with the championship. Winning again. And I hope I can do it.
Anyone else you want to thank for the victory specifically today?
Yeah, for my girlfriend because now we moved for a new flat and he let me to play in our old rent. So I'm here and there is no only on just my computer and nothing else.
Congratulations on the victory today, and congratulations on the success on the weekend.
Thank you, guys, and thank you for the broadcast as well.
Mark Samagi with the victory today, and in reference to what he was talking about there a little bit with the victory, races a bit in real life. He's mentioned his getting the championship for his organization over the weekend in real world action. That team does do some real world racing and rallycross action in the respective region. So good to hear them come up on top there, Joe. He ends up coming up on top in this one today.
Yep, I think we're seeing why he is one of the quickest drivers week in and week out in this series. Certainly seems to click very, very well with this Jetta. And some drivers are like that. Just certain cars just match their driving style, or they just understand them better.
Indeed. What a race overall. See how things fare out with more championship action coming up in the next few weeks or so in this series. But we'd like to thank you for tuning into tonight's exciting action. We'd also like to thank Valhalla SimSport for organizing this series. Let's take the time to thank the companies providing the software and hardware for our broadcast listed up on screen now. Special thanks go to Oran and provides her wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. Thanks to the team as well today, and Joe and Sean. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, including the upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. To help support the channel, you can check out our merchandise for sale at gsrc.stormvy.com, or you can check out our social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global SimRacing Channel, and Instagram at GSRC_Gram. Don't forget to head over to YouTube page and hit that big red subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, so you don't miss a moment here on the Global SimRacing Channel. Next race is scheduled for October 24th. The date, or the place rather, is to be determined. Sure to stick around and see the action come up next weekend, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, start for round number 4 of the season. We also have many upcoming races for other series listed up on your screen, including the major series tomorrow afternoon for the American region, where they go for the Bathurst 500. Be sure to mark those down and check them out on our calendar. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.